Rama Kudami, who is with the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. She's on the board of the Washington Peace Center and a member of the National Committee of the War Resisters League. She organizes with the Muslim American Women's Policy Forum and with the Syrian Solidarity Collective, and has been an activist with many other organizations, including the Arab American Action Network, Code Pink Women for Peace. She has a Master's of Arts degree in Conflict Resolution from Georgetown University and a BS in Journalism from Northwestern University. Rama.
Hey.
Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you all for coming out here today to put out and make very clear that we must end all wars. So last October marked 16 years since the start of the War on Terror, which has destroyed millions of lives worldwide through bombing campaigns, military occupations, extrajudicial assassinations, torture, black sites, preemptive prosecution, FBI entrapment, and countering violent extremism programs that seek to criminalize Muslims. During Obama's last year in office, the U.S. dropped over 26,000 bombs as part of this war on terror, the majority on Syria and Iraq, but also on Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and Pakistan. Since coming to power in January, Trump has further expanded this war on terror, as folks have alluded to, killing thousands already thus far in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. Something that should come to no surprise to anyone who followed his campaign promises, which included taking out the families of ISIS. The U.S. just killed dozens of children in Raqqa, Syria, which is under the control of ISIS, making it even more shocking that anyone thought that Trump may come in with a non-interventionist foreign policy or be himself anti-war. While there has been much organizing these past few months against the increasing levels of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim oppression, particularly as related to hate crimes, the Muslim bans, and calls for a Muslim registry, we are not yet seeing as many activists and groups make the connections between how these increasing levels of Islamophobia and these policies are within the greater framework of a war on terror. And how, for example, if we truly want to help refugees, we not only need to push the United States to accept more refugees, but also end the wars and the conditions that they are fleeing from, whether it is by U.S. bombs or brutal dictators. And unfortunately, we're all happy that we're all here, and we're all happy to be coming and saying, yes, we are committed to anti-war. But unfortunately, sometimes even within our anti-war circles, we have accepted the rhetoric of the war on terror and accepted that the war on terror is actually necessary. Sometimes we even use the same right-wing Islamophobic justifications for this war on terror. So, for example, we saw people who are so eager when Trump bombed a Syrian regime airbase a few weeks ago come out and mobilize and say no to war. And yet we had just mentioned that thousands of people have been killed by U.S. bombs in the past few months, and not as much energy to say, no, we need to go out and say no more wars, no more into any of these wars. Why are we so willing to label as anti-war and anti-interventionist politicians who believe actually in the war on terror, who describe themselves as war hawks on the war on terror, who have declared that we need to militarily destroy quote-unquote radical Islamic theology, which is right-wing propaganda versus actual progressive ideals and principles, and who actually defend U.S.-backed regimes like in Israel, like in Egypt, who have their own war on terror against the Palestinian people and Egyptian people. Why are we so comfortable with allowing the Assad regime in Syria and his backers, Russia and Iran, to use the same war on terror rhetoric that we are so against to justify their own war crimes against the Syrian people? Under Trump, we have seen the reinvigoration of so many movements for justice and freedom. It's really inspiring to see so many people come out and say, we need to unite and take on Trump together. And this is really an opportune time then for the anti-war activists, all of us here, to also use this opportunity and say, we need to reinvigorate and re-energize our dedication to being anti-war. And for us to be successful, we must center and amplify those most impacted by these wars, those who are actually living under the bombs, or those who are going to be targeted by the national security apparatus. In particular, with the war on terror, we must reject all forms of Islamophobia from the right and the left, and stand against any states using the war on terror as cover for their wars and oppression. And we must absolutely be internationalists in our politics, for justice from across the United States to Palestine to Syria. If we let borders define our activism and solidarity, We are denying people agency by only viewing them as victims of U.S. imperialism versus people who are every day struggling for freedom and dignity. We are entrenching our own form of U.S. exceptionalism, that somehow or another we can only focus on U.S. wars versus thinking, hey, this is a war and machine that is all interconnected and we need to take it all down. And we must also not limit our call, who we include in our calls for collective liberation. As we all live in and benefit from U.S. empire every single day, every single one of us who is a U.S. taxpayer who lives in the U.S., we are benefiting every day from U.S. empire. We must owe it to the millions of people who are killed by the United States in its wars to actually be against all wars and systems of oppression. Thank you so much. Free Palestine.
All right, it's my great pleasure to introduce now Reverend Lenox Yearwood. Reverend was a veteran of the U.S. Air Force as a chaplain. He's now currently a minister and community organizer. He's serving as the president of the Hip Hop Caucus, which is a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that empowers young people to participate in elections, policy making, and service projects. Reverend Yearwood is led or been involved in a number of high-profile campaigns to engage young voters, as well as working on human rights issues in the Gulf Coast region after Hurricane Katrina. Reverend Yearwood, thank you.
When I say no war, you say no warming. No war. No war. When I say no war, you say no wall. No war.
No war.
No war.
No war.
No war. Y'all sound all right. It's good to be out here. It's very important to be out here at this time. I'm very honored. My name is Rev Yearwood. I'm the president of the Hip Hop Caucus and served in the Air Force as an officer. And so I'm definitely glad to join with many of my other veterans for peace. Veterans for Peace, make some noise.
Yeah, in the house.
Yes, indeed. So we are at a moment, most veterans, all those who served in the military took an oath of an office to protect the Constitution from foreign and domestic enemies. And so sometimes the foreign enemies are easy to see, but the domestic enemies are a lot harder because they cloak themselves in patriotism. But the way that we can tell if someone is a domestic enemy is when they are actually hurting Americans, when they are doing things that cause Americans to lose their lives, when they are putting forth a budget that is $54 billion for the military and cutting away things from the Environmental Protection Agency that will have folks in Flint have dirty water, that is an enemy of the state.
Yeah.
When you have folks who know we can transition from fossil fuels to clean energy, know that there are those who are dying from asthma and cancer and emphysema, know we can build renewable energies and get away from pipelines and stop disregarding those who are in the Standing Rock Nation, that is an enemy of the state.
Yeah.
When you're putting much more money toward bombs and not books, and building drones and not schools, that is an enemy of the state. You are hurting Americans. You are hurting this country. And so we, as veterans for peace, must stand up.
Yeah.
That's our calling. It's what it's always been. And anybody who says that's not what you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to allow for the children in this great country, no matter they're in Kansas or they're in the Bronx, if you're allowing for the children of this country to be hurting, allow for the children of this country to go hungry, allow for the children of this country not to have health care, allow for the children of this country to breathe in toxins, no one to have clean air and clean water, that is a problem.
Yeah.
And that hypocrisy must stop. That's the problem. What's going on is that we have this hypocrisy. So to further show how this hypocrisy goes forward is one of the things here that we are constantly seeing. And that's last week, the president went to go visit the Pope. And when he went to go visit the Pope, he presented the Pope with a series of books. And now, I would think that based upon the rhetoric of this Pope, that he would have some of the most alt-right, vile, white supremacist kind of books to give the Pope. Because all he talks about, books about banning Muslims, books about building walls, books about homophobic, books about building pipelines. I'm sure he would have given the Pope a book about how you build a pipeline from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico. That's what I would have thought would have been the books that he would have given the Pope. That's all he talks about. But instead, what does he give the Pope? He gives the Pope a series of books from Dr. Martin Luther King. That's the hypocrisy that we're talking about. So that when he's in the presence of someone who he thinks he should do something, instead of going forth with the lies which you're doing, he presented him a series of books. I mean, books from when before he spoke here at the Lincoln Memorial, from 54 and 58, all the way to his last book. Where do we go from here? Community or chaos? And so my thing to this administration is stop passing out books from Dr. Martin Luther King and start reading the books from Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Don't take the books from here, from America, go all the way to Italy to pass them out. Stay right here in Washington, D.C., on Pennsylvania Avenue, and read every single book you gave to the Pope.
Yeah.
Because the Pope gave you the book that he wrote. Because he ain't playing around with this madness. He said, here is my encyclical on climate change. Here's my book on why we should transition from fossil fuels to clean energy. Here is my book on why this generation is fighting for existence, not only equality. Here is my book of what we should do so the next generation can live. Don't give me a book written by a black preacher that you ain't reading. Give me a book that you will read to protect the people of America.
Yeah.
So as we stand here, and I think about Dr. King, I think about his Beyond Vietnam speech that he gave 50 years ago at Riverside Church in New York. When he gave that speech he discussed how the greatest purveyor of violence is his own country, America. That was in that book. And later on, after he wrote that in June of 1967, he went to Vancouver and he said that my dream had turned into a nightmare because this government and this country doesn't really want to do what's needed. So while we come out here and celebrate the I Have a Dream speech, understand that Dr. King himself morphed and transitioned and grew and realized that the things regarding militarism and capitalism and poverty and all those things wrapped together are hurting and killing our country. Mr. Trump, he stated at that time that a country that continues to spend more money on military than on programs of social uplift is heading to spiritual death. That's the person's book you are handing out to the Pope. And so these people here today have read a few of those books from Dr. King. These folks today understand what it means to live a life of nonviolence. These folks today have done something you have not done and served in this military and understand its might when uncontrolled. These folks today have come together as black and white and brown and yellow and male and female and straight and gay and theist and atheist. These folks has come together as Americans fighting for this country. And so these folks will march to the White House. These folks will go to your front house. These folks will let you know, stop passing out books and start reading the books you keep passing out. And so, the one thing as I reflect on these steps, Dr. King did speak about his dream. And the greatest thing that we are fighting against now is against both no war and no warming regarding climate change and other factors. And I want to speak for the next generation, because all these speeches really here sometimes don't mean so much. They're just speeches on some concrete steps. But sometimes the next generation will get a videotape, and they'll wonder how there were so many people who were upset and those who weren't upset because of what this president is doing. Now, somebody mentioned earlier about President Obama, and I agree with you, because this is not about Republican or Democrat. This is about the people. Democrats and Republicans continue to be in the pockets of the wealthy. And until we stop having money in politics, until we stop coddling politicians like their children regarding Democrat or Republican, falling for that process and instead putting forth people, then people will not win. But when organized people come together, organized people beat organized money every single time.
Yep.
And so we leave here with our fist in the air. We march. When I say no war, you yell, no warming. No war.
No worry.
No war.
No worry.
When I say no war, you say no wall. No war.
No war.
No war.
No war.
When I say all power to the people, you say all power to the people. All power to the people.
All power to the people.
Let's go get them.
All right.